Thank you for tuning in. Going to read some of the pages of chapter 1 from the book I wrote, Modern Day Book by Reverend Susan MeeLing. Chapter 1, Precursor, on page 14. Due to the reality of the Palm Sunday 2000 head injury, of which I had been in a coma and had a subarachnoid hemorrhage, of which took several years to dissipate and go away, but the damages of which did not heal, as I still in 2020 deal with headaches, migraines, memory deficits, and cognitive disorders. Though externally I kind of look normal, I have a few points of which to make that I have joked about with my son when driving through the state of Montana in 2016, though I also was in a coma back in 2000. Though I will expand upon what occurred in Montana throughout the years of my Medal of Honor art project, I had joked with my son James at the time, if you really think about things, because of when my Palm Sunday 2000 head injury happened, I was only 1 year old when I delivered you. He asked me, "What do you mean, Mom?" I said, after I woke up from the coma and was in the medical hold unit, which was at Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio, Texas, Watson, which was one of the soldiers at the time in medical hold, which is now the Warrior Transition Unit, had to teach me the colors of the rainbow. I thought orange was the color of blue when looking at the sky, that red was the color of green, yellow was the color of purple, and so on. Isn't that funny? Not the fact that I went backwards, but funny how I'm technically, mentally-ish, as old as you are. Isn't that funny? He looked out the window before looking back at me and asked, "Mom, what do you think of that sign?" I asked my son, "Which one? The one that says the road is weaving? Then that means the road is drunk, right?" He smiled as he put his hands over his face and said, "Mom, you're so weird." I said to my son, if you think about it, because of the Palm Sunday 2000 head injury and the levels of the disability stuff, that means anyone who purposefully took advantage of my stuff, does that mean that they did something that was wrong? He, meaning my son, put his head back into his hands and said, "Mom, I love you." I said to my son, James, "You know, I have always loved you and I will always love you. You are my son and you are so important to me, just as your sister is important to me and always has been." In reference, I'm going to pause real quick. The reason why I said the road was drunk because of the weaving sign was because just before that discussion with my son, I had been stuck in traffic behind this red Hyundai. I don't know if it was an Elantra or a Sonata, but something similar to that body style. And there was a female driving it with a male in the passenger seat and then 2 or 3 females in the back seat who were driving 30 to 35 miles at the fastest on that highway after my son and I had gone to Montana Vortex in Columbia Falls. Once we had gotten from, meaning my son and I in the white Dodge Grand Caravan, from the road to the highway in Kalispell, Montana, it took several hours to get from there to the second town before Arley, Montana, which I was supposed to take him to the Tibetan Buddhist monastery. But because of that red Hyundai driving at the fastest 30 to 35 miles an hour, there were points in time where that female was driving 10 miles an hour. And it was like, if I didn't have my son in the car, as well as my Medal of Honor art project in the car, I would hit your car in the rear end because I got insurance, make you go off the side of the cliff and just keep driving. But I have this thing that I don't want to go to prison, so I didn't do that. And when we got to the gas station, my son and I, of course, went inside to use the restroom. He went in the male restroom, I went in the female restroom. Went outside, standing on the wooden porch with the wood balcony type thing. The car that I had, the white Dodge Grand Caravan, had a license plate from California, and the license plate started with 666. I look like I do. You can see my bright red hair. I have a whole bunch of tattoos, and no offense to the state of Montana, I know what I look like, and I was driving a California license plate car with 666. Doesn't take a head injury to figure out that when the police officer pulled up, it was like, in my thoughts, it was like, and I'm right here. I do not camo, and I really hope I could think of someone else that he'd be here for, but I have a feeling that he's here for me. He got out of the car. I'm going to pause. He got out of the car. He looks at the Dodge Grand Caravan, sees the 666 license plate from California, looks up to where I'm at, and mind you, I also had a seat belt. Belt buckle that was for the Demon car, the Dodge Demon, which I really want that car. That would be awesome to get that car. I read the specs on that, and I was, whew, my insurance company probably would not be too happy if I got that car, but I really want that car. It's so pretty. I mean, I prefer the Lamborghini Diablo personally, but I don't think that car is legally allowed on the streets in the United States of America because of the speed. But I really like that car so much. I really want one so bad. I really do. But I'd have a lot of fun with it. The lesser amount of technology, irony, but the speed and the horsepower. And anyway, so police officer looks up, sees me. He looks at the car again, sees me. I don't know if he saw the seatbelt buckle belt that I had on, but obviously he saw my hair and the car, and he goes, California license plate? And it's like, yes, that would be me. Hi, how can I help you, officer? And the officer steps up closer to where I'm at, and he goes, I heard we got reports that you are drunk driving. And, you know, at that time, responding with, but I'm standing here, I'm not driving, was not a good response, though that was what was going through my head. And police officer got real close. And I was like, hi. So I repeated to him what he said, but the truth with what happened. I said, I haven't been drinking. Well, my son comes out from the gas station, and I had just bought a soda and a few other snacks, and all my son heard was me say to the police officer, no, I wasn't drunk driving. My son starts laughing hysterically, and he goes, my mom drink alcohol? Are you kidding me? And I look at him, and boy, shut up, look, there's a police officer, like, right there. And he sees the police officer in front of me because he thought that I was speaking with someone I knew, like, personally, that was a friend. And my son snaps to attention, and he's just like, yeah, hi, officer. No, my mom does not drink at all. Like, she is the biggest lightweight ever. And the police officer, as I'm, looking at my son, he steps real close because there is a certain air about if you've been drinking. And when I hadn't, obviously, he could smell that there was no alcohol on me. And so, police officer and I speak. I didn't realize that then, at that time, I apologize, Montana police officers, as well as the state of Montana, that I didn't think about that because it'd been a long trip. I mean, I had driven from Lakewood, Washington, to Missoula, Montana, to drop off some Medal of Honor artwork pieces down to a couple of areas as far as I think it was either Anaconda or Butte, and then checked into the hotel at Deer Lodge, Montana, and then drove to the Montana Vortex in Columbia Falls, Montana, because my now ex-boyfriend, the male, Jesse Leroy Hoover Jr., had done the math and added all the hours up for me. And then, knowing that I can't do math, I went from college algebra with trigonometry and calculus to second grade math. Doesn't take a head injury to figure out. There's some issues there. And so I didn't even know that there were 24 hours in a day until after I got back from that trip. So, whatchamacallit, my son is being very respectful to the police officer. I'm being respectful to the police officer. I raised him a specific way he'd do to be, like, respectful to law enforcement. But it was still one of those, anybody who has any responsibilities can very much be like, boy. Anyway, I didn't realize that it was in reference to that, and I would have said something immediately if I understood, but I also had been driving a little bit, and I was intending to get my son to the Tibetan Buddhist monastery so that way I could show him the cool stuff that I had found, but instead that female in the red Hyundai and the male in the passenger seat and the 2 or 3 females in the back seat that had caused hours of traffic backup. I didn't think about that, and I forget things very easily, as this video probably is an example. But that would be in reference to the weaving sign, where I was like, oh, it's a drunk sign. I was trying to make light of the situation because we were on our way back to the cabin to get some rest. And it was, before I get back to reading, after my son went into the cabin to lay down while watching TV and sleep a little bit, I went out front on the porch of the cabin and smoking a cigarette, and there were some hummingbirds that were flying around playing grab ass. I didn't realize my hair pretty much, where's the food? Like, because there was one that came up like right here, and it's like, I'm smoking a cigarette, you mind? And it just kind of and there were a couple others that were buzzing around, and then they started playing grab ass again. And this female from one of the other cabins groups comes over, we're talking, and she says, where are your dogs? And I asked, why would I need my dogs? Like, I mean, why would I need dogs in the state of Montana at a campground? I don't understand. What's the big deal? And she said, do you know that there are bears in Montana? And I was like, of course there's teddy bears in Montana. They're so fluffy. But, you know, I do my best to, you know, not get myself in trouble. Because I don't want to have to punch a, you know, grizzly bear in the face to defend myself. But at the same time, I would be that person who wanted to be, who's your fluffy? Who's your fluffy teddy bear? And maybe get your little ears. So teeny tiny compared to what they used to be. And so grizzly bears are so tiny nowadays compared to what I've read, that they are only like 6.5 feet tall. They used to be so much bigger, but I guess technically a different species, but it's still a bear. Anyway, fluffy. And the female was like, don't you think you need dogs to protect you from bears in the state of Montana? What would dogs do compared to what I could do? And she just kind of looked at me and she's like, they can bark. I was like, uh-huh. Dogs bark. They do. I don't understand why I would need dogs. I understand now. In Montana, I would guesstimate that cutie patootie Navy SEAL guy that apparently is from the state of Montana probably might kind of giggle at some point. But I also didn't think about that because it was kind of like, I got this. I realize how silly I sound. However, I would have defended my son, and that would have been fine, and I would have handled business at the same time of being like, what you do, fluffy tubber? I understand. So I'm going to just go back to reading so that way that's understood. There's a little clarification. So page 15, about the Palm Sunday 2000 head injury and how it occurred. While important in certain regards, it is in certain ways inconsequential in reference to this. However, I did get the head injury because of a drill sergeant who threw me into the metal part of the bunk after completing a smoke session, which after 45 minutes from the time I had started counting, because the clock that was on the wall behind the bunk in the bay across from me, as I had written about it in my first 2 books. The reason I thought he had chosen to single me out for the smoke session during basic training at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, was because the night before, okay, I don't actually need this to explain that. So in basic training at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, I was put on CQ duty. Anybody who's gone through basic training of any of the branches for the United States of America's Armed Forces. I was in the Army, but I'm sure that the Air Force, Coast Guard, Marine Corps, and Navy do have something similar where overnight you switch who's on fire guard in the Bay area and then who's at CQ duty at the office. Well, CQ duty the night before my head injury. So I was there with, I think she was a PV2 or a PV3 Washington, and she and I were CQ. A female showed up with a picnic basket, and she said she was the drill sergeant's wife. I said, may I see your ID? I need to see your ID. She said, I don't need to show you my ID. I said, no, you do. You need to show me your ID so that way I can verify who you are, so that way, you know, there's no problems. She decided to get it out because I wasn't going to let her just walk in to the back, although now I realize I probably didn't. Anyway, showed me her ID card. It matched the ID card for the last name of the drill sergeant that I can't remember. He was taller than me, bald, and he was darker complexion than me, but that's realistically not much. I mean, about the same skin tone color as like Washington for the drill sergeant, but so the female, his wife, went into the back. There was some screaming, throwing of stuff, yelling, and then a very loud slap. And when she ran out, I could see the handprint on her face. I reached for the phone, which was on the desk in between me and Washington, and I started calling 911. Drill sergeant ran out to go after her. He saw that I was on the phone. He ripped the phone out of the wall, and I was with Washington for the first round of the CQ duty, and until the next morning I was smoked. Those who have military experience understand that that's a bunch of physical exercises, and then breakfast was whatever time at the mess hall at the DFAC, and then I decided to go to church that day, which is the reason why I know it's Palm Sunday, because there was a folded palm in the shape of a cross, and I was never able to fold that at Old Tenet Presbyterian Church because of my allergies. Went to church services, spoke with the female that was in the passenger seat as the male driver drove the van with everybody. When I got back with the group to the bay, finished doing the Sunday chores, went and did the physical stuff, whatever course it was. Lunch, of course, then some more stuff, and then dinner, and then few other things. Then it was lights out, and the drill sergeant showed up, decided to do a smoke session because make the ceiling sweat sort of thing, and whatchamacallit, when he walked around, so he walked in from the one side. My bay was against the wall by the window over here. So he went in, walked around the little corner bay area before coming out where the fire guard desk was, walked around the very back area, walked along to where the bathroom was, walked over again as he's still smoking, went around towards the other bay, came back like a zigzag type thing before coming to where my bed or my bunk was, started yelling at me. And I was like, okay, basic training. That's what happens. Just pushing. Okay. And so then he ordered everybody to stand at parade rest and proceeded to smoke me for however long. And then at some point when going down, getting up, going down, getting up, going down, getting up, different stuff, I've seen that across the bay, or across the little walkway where the bunk was for the female that was across from me, who I didn't understand why she had to get rid of the hair that she had done before, because it was natural, but whatever. The clock was on the wall. It was an analog clock, and so that was when I started timing. And at the 45-minute mark is when he stopped and asked me, Private Hom, because that's my maiden last name, why do you think that, or why haven't you broken yet? Why haven't you cried? Why this, why that? And he, typical drill sergeant in the face, blah, blah, blah. I was 17 when I joined. Drill sergeant, do I have permission to speak freely? In basic training. And drill sergeant looked me up and down and he goes, go ahead. Fine, go right ahead. I didn't understand that at that time. It was the tone of voice I did not understand. So I told him, I grew up in, as I grew in my biological mother's uterus, I heard her complain about me not being another one of her miscarriages and how many times she had had an abortion that worked before me, and why couldn't I just die? And then, when I came out, my biological father was like, you're missing a chromosome and you're missing something between your legs. And so, I grew up hearing that while being called a bitch, a whore, a slut, and a cunt from that point on. And, my biological sister is the planned one. So, no offense, drill sergeant, but what are you going to say that's going to be worse than that? And then, as far as, like, you can only smoke me. You can't, like, beat me like the way my biological father did. Like, all you could do is, like, make me do push-ups and sit-ups and Superman and different other whatever. And, you can't pick up, a filing cabinet full of jeweler's tools and throw it at me. You can't beat me with a wooden spoon, break it, go underneath the cabinet, and get a whole bunch more out, and then blame me for breaking the wooden spoon as you beat me, and call me a bunch of names for something I didn't do. So no offense, drill sergeant, but, what you gonna do? I already know that this is a mind fuck. I already did my research before joining the United States Army, what? And that would be when he picked me up and started shaking me and screaming at me, and he threw me into the metal part of the bunk. And the next thing that I remember, I do remember, like, I think they're hospital lights, because they're, like, in my memory, they're, like, long fluorescent lights, and then there were some blankets that were white, and then when I looked down from what I think was the gurney, there was, like, a speckle floor with, like, different T intersection type thing, whatever. And so, and then I woke up at Fort Sam Houston, apparently. So, that in a nutshell is, pun intended, my aspect from that. So, again, going back to the book, or the modern day book, so I already discussed discuss that in a more specific way. So that goes through chapter 1 from 14 to page 14 to page 20. And I'll go all the way through to page 25-ish. So, basically, after waking up from the coma, I was told this, I don't actually remember this. I was told that I had seen a phone and called. The only phone number I remembered, and that happened to be the house in Illinois. My biological father said that he answered the phone and that he asked me where I was and how basic training was going. He hadn't heard from me in a while. And I told him, I don't know where I'm at, from what he said. And so I was told to describe what was around me, and I did. He realized I was in a hospital, and so he told me to push a button, which had, like, apparently a nurse's face, and whatchamacallit, I did. Apparently, some people came in the room and said, "Oh, you're awake." Guess so. But I was told essentially that I had woken up at some point in time. My biological family had flown down from Illinois to Texas and San Antonio. I was told afterwards that I had a temperature of 104.3 or 104.7. And because my biological father had gone to nursing school and had become an LVN in New Jersey, and so he had realized I was having an allergic reaction to whatever medication they had been given me, and so got me taken off of whatever that was, and then I was told that I was sent back to Illinois for convalescent leave. I don't remember whether it was like 10 days of convalescent leave or 20 days or 30 days. But during that time, I had supposedly met with some people. They told me that this situation, during Christmas the following year, they had said that they had told me that Dan Kenny, someone who was in Crystal Lake South, had committed suicide, which he had put my name in the note because I was the only person who had ever defended him all the years that he had been bullied. Dee Dee had told me that. And then I got pissed off because Eric, the quarterback of the football team, had been the person that I had been defending Dan Kenny from, and Eric got pissy because I didn't handle that shit. I didn't deal with that shit. I was ready to beat his ass, and, you know, I had already beaten up Nick, which was Joy Hoover's boyfriend, Nick Robinson, and pissed off the cheerleading squad that I didn't want to be on because my biological parents thought it'd be a great idea for me to be on the cheerleading squad to make some female friends after growing up in New Jersey playing street hockey and ice hockey and basketball and baseball and football, hanging out with grease monkeys in the garage. I mean, I don't know, does anybody see a whole bunch of reasons as to why I didn't get along with the cheerleaders and how I knew that was going to be a problem beforehand? But there were a few issues. I didn't get along with the cheers. Not all of them, but the majority of the cheerleaders, like Joy Hoover, Tiffany Ashwani, and Crystal Cook. I didn't get along with Joy Hoover's boyfriend, Nick Robinson. He had used the N-word when he was facing me, and I I came out. he, I didn't care. I was in a cheerleader uniform. I was like, "What'd you call me?" And then he he looked at Joy Hoover, the one of the co-captains on the cheerleading squad, and he's like, "Joy, get your cheerleader under control." And I was like, "Bitch, go fuck yourself. What did you call me?" And then Nick Robinson was like, "I wasn't calling you," and he repeated the N-word, and I'm like, "Then who the were you talking about?" And he's pointed the guy behind you, and I go and look, and I'm like, "Okay, I don't know why you called him the N-word, but I don't care, because where I'm from, that gets you a beat down." And then he proceeded to push me, and then I beat him. I did. Knocked him to the ground and just kept swinging because he kept trying to hit me. And when he stopped swinging, that was when I stopped. But going back to the whole thing, apparently that happened at Applebee's as far as being told about Dan Kenny. And since like Crystal Cook and Joy Hoover and Tiffany Swanee had a crush on Eric, the star quarterback, and I was like, "I don't care. You're a douchebag piece of shit. And how dare you go after Dan Kenny because the two of you are in the same remedial course, but you want to go and call him stupid." That didn't make any sense to me. But then afterwards, of seeing Eric in the parking lot and having a conversation, let's just leave it at that. He understood that I was very upset that Dan Kenny had committed suicide because he wouldn't stop bullying him. And I told him, "I hope you get addicted to every drug out there and just, die in the street because that's all you deserve because you're that worthless of a piece of shit." And then afterwards, another male, which was friends with Dan, or Dee Dee, was named Daniel or Danny, and he had chaptered out of the Marine Corps, and he apparently had gotten a starter pistol to defend himself against some people who were picking on him. And my first question was, what are you going to do if the other people pull out a real firearm and don't realize that's a starter pistol? And he was like, "It don't matter." I'm like, "No, it really does. What if you get pulled over by the police and they think you have a real firearm?" And he was like, "It doesn't matter, I'll use it." And it's like, "Yeah, no, that's stupid." And so as he was waving it around in the Applebee's parking lot, I took it from him. And it was so easy. It was not difficult. But anyway, I gave that starter pistol to my biological father when I got back to the house in Illinois. Because I was like, well, I probably shouldn't go on an airplane with this. There might be an issue, so I don't want to cause any problems with that. And so getting back to Illinois, getting back from Illinois to San Antonio, I do remember I actually went to either Kelly Air Force Base or Lackland Air Force Base because I was supposed to get on a MAC flight to go back to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, where my basic training was. And there was a couple, and I was very much lost when I was walking around looking for where I was supposed to go because I didn't understand the paperwork. And so apparently a colonel was like, "What are you doing?" I was like, looking for where I'm supposed to go. His wife had asked what I was doing in a military facility by myself because I looked really young. And I was like, "Oh, well, I am 17. And she was like, "So what are you doing on a military base by yourself?" And I was like, "Oh, because I got to go back to basic training." And the female was like, "No, you can't be in basic training. You said you're 17. And I'm like, "Yeah. But, I was in basic training. I had a head injury on Palm Sunday and, gonna go back." And the colonel took my paper. Well, he didn't take my paperwork. He asked for my paperwork, asked for my military ID after I finished explaining what happened. And he was like, "So you can just stay right here." And I'm like, "Well, okay." And, he did take my paperwork and my military ID. So, I wasn't going anywhere. I wasn't going to go walk around a military base like, do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. And so, when they came back, he was like, so I want you to remember this. Like, and he went over it with me. Him and his wife went over with me repeatedly. Like, yes, I remember. I don't remember what base at this point, but then like they repeated the military base, which Air Force base it was. It could have been Randolph too. I don't know. There's 3 Air Force bases there in San Antonio. So, but he was like, just remember San Antonio, Texas, please. Oh my God, remember San Antonio, Texas. Okay, San Antonio, Texas. Remember San Antonio, Texas. Remember San Antonio, Texas. And remember San Antonio, Texas. Okay, sir. Yes. Yes, sir. San Antonio, Texas. I was there today. And so, but he had my orders changed, thankfully, from going back to Fort Sill, Oklahoma to go back through basic training, though I think that was probably literally a life-saving thing. And I was put in medical hold unit at Fort Sam Houston, which is JBSA now, and and it's also Warrior Transition Unit now, until I went through my medical hold process until I was boarded out and medically retired. I was put on TDRL for 5 years, or 4.5, 5 years, and then I was fully medically retired. And so that is going to be the end of this particular portion of the modern day book, because I don't actually need to read the words to know what I went through and explain it. So there's that. But you can go to my website, www.susanmeeling.com, and you can see the stuff that I've done. Look over the Ornery PSA, which is my journal blog. You can see some of my artwork, including my Medal of Honor art project. And you can get links for all of the books to follow along, because I just doing some clarifying in reference to modern day books. So that is page 14 to page 24. So please subscribe to this channel, because I'm going to be going through a lot. It's kind of a little thick. You guys have a good one.